Welcome to another episode of Wheel of Horror, the podcast where two best friends spin a wheel once a week. It chooses the horror movie and they discuss it. Today we're talking about 2005's or 2006's Hostel, which was directed by Eli Roth. I'm your co-host, Alec.
This is Joe.
And you know, Joe, this was pretty fucking intense, man.
So this is a first time for you, right?
This is my first time, dude. I've actively avoided seeing this movie, for a long time. And I gotta say, not as bad as I thought it was gonna be. I genuinely thought it was gonna be more intense, but it was still pretty intense. So you'd seen it before, right?
Yes, I saw it probably the weekend it opened. I was probably somewhat looking forward to it because I had seen Cabin Fever, Eli Roth's first movie in theaters, and actually really enjoyed that movie. That was 2003, and we just talked about 2003 with our Darkness Falls conversation and how that was like this interesting kind of time between horror trends, and I felt like Cabin Fever was this kind of, it called back to movies like Evil Dead, but there was still something fresh about it. So, I think I probably went into Hostel kind of looking forward to it. And what's interesting, too, is it was like a packed audience, if I remember correctly. This wasn't I would say this whole ultra-violent movement, I mean, people call it torture porn. I feel like that's a little, I don't know, dismissive. I don't really like to use that term, but this whole kind of wave of horror movies, you would think it was just some kind of cult curiosity, but these movies were huge. Like, I remember seeing Saw, the first couple of Saws in theaters. Those were like sold out audiences. And I feel like this movie was a big event.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. You're talking about Saw, where it's like, at this point, I think maybe Saw 3 would have been out by this point, or 2, whatever. So it was like, people were comfortable with more intense graphic stuff, gore and horror. Same thing with the Texas Chainsaw. It's like, okay, it was a remake, but it was like cranked up to 11 on the gore factor compared to the 70s version. I know a lot of people always talk about like being reflective of the times, and this was like post 9/11, right in the middle of like the the torture that was happening with terrorists and stuff. So I think it was like our cultural sense just got darker,
Mm-hmm.
But it honestly, it doesn't surprise me that Hostel was sold out and it was a packed theater. It really doesn't. If this came out in like 1999, I think it would be a very niche thing. But in 2006 or 5, whenever it came out, I kind of get it, dude. I don't know. You were there, so there's clearly a draw.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I do feel like it started with the remake of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It was like the remake trend and the torture porn trend were happening at the same time, and a lot of the time they kind of overlapped. Even I just rewatched the remake of House of Wax.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
And even that, which I hadn't seen since it was released almost 20 years ago, even that I felt like had this kind of just very gritty and almost kind of vile sensibilities, I mean, they really were trying to recapture that kind of 70s aesthetic. And, some movies did it much better than others.
Well, there's one movie that came out in 2006 that Eric and I covered right before you jumped on, and it was called Turistas. You ever seen that one?
No.
Okay. I don't think a lot of people have, dude. And it's kind of surprising. It's got like a decent cast. I know it's got that Josh Duhamel guy in it, and not Olivia. Maybe it is Olivia Wilde. I can't remember, but it's like a kind of a decent cast. And it came out in 2006, and it's about like a group of Americans that go to Brazil and they get captured and their organs get harvested. Pretty similar to this movie, but I guess the difference between this and Hostel is like those people are genuinely just like, hey, we're just on vacation, and they get drugged on a beach. This movie's like, we're here for prostitutes and we're doing bad stuff. But dude, maybe the listeners will agree with me that I actually think Turistas might be more intense than Hostel. And it was kind of a borderline big budget film too, same year, and but I feel like nobody saw that movie.
Yeah, no, that's a new one on me. Another one I remember that was very early on in this trend was Alexander Aja, who did the remake of The Hills Have Eyes. He did a movie called High Tension.
Huh.
And I believe it was a French movie. And yeah, that came out, I think, around 2003. So that was probably a pioneer, and one of the early ones. But I'll tell you, most of these movies kind of left me cold.
Hmm.
And we'll talk about this movie in particular, but this was never really my thing.
I totally agree with you, dude. Like, for some reason, man, it's like I don't mind violence if it's almost just like more sporadic or like less realistic. Like Jason taking an axe to somebody's head doesn't bother me at all. But a guy tied up and getting his fingers cut off and it's like showing his fingers getting cut off, I don't like that kind of stuff either.
Yeah, and I'm not passing judgment on anyone who
No.
loves these movies,
No, no,
because
no.
God knows I'm a fan of movies that a lot of people would be like, "What? You really like that shit?" I mean, and I'd be hard pressed to tell you why I find a Friday the 13th so much more charming than this movie. I mean, nostalgia is probably has a lot to do with it.
Mm. No, I was gonna say those movies, the Friday 13th and the Halloweens. I know this sounds crazy, but they almost feel safe in a weird way compared to this. Because I'm like, this couldn't happen. A crazy guy in a hockey mask at a lake with he's unstoppable. This is impossible. This really feels like this could happen, dude. And I think that's what makes me uncomfortable about it.
Yeah. And I mean, sometimes the idea that this could really happen works really well with something like The Silence of the Lambs.
Mm.
A movie like that doesn't leave me cold because I don't know, it's wonderfully acted and everybody is working at the top of their game. Some of these movies, I'm not even really talking about Hostel. I'm just talking about a lot of the movies that came out in the early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
It was like we all just paid our admission just to see how much we can take. That's what this whole subgenre felt like it was about. It
Yeah.
felt like we were all just seeing how, like, what our limit was. And it's
Right.
really interesting. It's like just a really interesting, again, no judgment. It's just an interesting thing to look back on. It's like eventually we all woke up with this hangover and we were like, what the hell were we watching for like 3 or 4 years? Because I feel like it ended pretty abruptly too, like just the Saw franchise. The first one was huge. The second one had a pretty big drop off as far as box office goes. And then the third one was direct to video,
Really?
so yeah, absolutely.
Whoa. Wait, you mean Hostel or Saw?
A Hostel.
Oh, okay, okay. I was like, are you
Yes.
sure? I'm like, dude, Saw. I
Yeah.
remember that was in theater. Okay, so Hostel. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, no, 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 no. The Saw movies did consistently well. The Saw
Right.
movies, honestly, are probably the closest thing to like a Friday the 13th we've
Mm-hmm.
had in the past couple of decades, where it's almost like tradition. You and your friends go every summer, or in the case of Saw, every Halloween. It's
Right.
like it was just something you did. But yeah, I mean, and I don't know if I think those movies did drop off eventually too. But if you look at Rob Zombie's movies too, I mean, after the Halloween movies, most of his movies were direct to VOD, and they were fan funded, like crowd funded too.
Mm.
So it's really interesting. And again, I'm a fan of some of these movies, especially some of Rob Zombie's early movies. I'm just looking at it and thinking about what an interesting period where this very niche subgenre was mainstream. It's just crazy to think about.
No, I love that we're like setting the stage of what this period of time was like and how Hostel like fits into like the Saw, Rob Zombie sort of thing. But what you had said that was really interesting, I liked, was how it felt like it was kind of like one upping everybody. Like every year it was like, all right, how can we get more intense? How can Saw was getting crazier, Hostel was getting crazier, and then I kind of feel like like the bubble burst around like Human Centipede time, where that was like, okay, we're sewing mouths onto assholes now. Like I think I think we're good. And then it kind of went into like Paranormal Activity for a while, and like It Follows, and more like supernatural stuff to kind of give us like a palate cleanser of like we've been watching horror for the like intense graphics because I don't really think these kind of movies really are made anymore. Like I can't think of extreme in-depth violent films like this really currently coming out.
Yeah, I think they've gone back to, being a subgenre, not being in the
Yeah.
mainstream anymore. But even so, if they are out there, I don't really follow them. So yeah,
Yeah.
it doesn't, it does seem like something that just sort of it was of its time, and then when its time was up, that was it, you know. And I do feel like the next kind of big thing was like the James Wan type movies, the Insidiouses and the Conjuring type movies, and you could
Right.
argue we're still sort of in that. So yeah, like I said, these movies were never my thing, but
Hmm.
you know, I do feel like we got a few interesting directors out of this movement. You know, like I feel like Eli Roth, Rob Zombie, their filmographies are kind of a mixed bag for me, but I feel like they're passionate and they have a point of view, and I'm always interested when I hear that they have a new movie out,
Hmm.
and that's more than I can say for a lot of directors.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Eli Roth has grown on me, in recent years. I was always kind of turned off to him. I'm even kind of like scared of his face. Like, so when I see like his actual face, I'm like, he's just a creepy dude. But I think he's extremely talented, and I actually like him in all the Quentin Tarantino films I've seen him in acting in too.
Mhm.
But yeah, I watched Cabin Fever for the first time on this podcast, and now we're doing this one. And yeah, I guess just kind of jumping into this film a bit. I had a couple questions for you. So you've seen it, you saw it in theaters. I didn't know that. Have you seen it since then?
I have not.
Okay, cool. So this is like 15 years in the making then for you, or even more now.
Hmm.
Okay, cool.
And I probably never would have if not for this podcast.
I never thought I would either.
Mhm.
And I'm not upset that I did, but I'm just kind of curious to see what your timeline here is. The other question I had for you: have you ever been to Europe?
Never.
Never. Okay. If I saw this movie before I went and I studied abroad, I honestly don't know if I would have gone. Like,
You know, I was going to bring that up in this conversation. I think something this movie does really, really well is just kind of it exploits that fear of the unknown, just like being in a place that is so unfamiliar, you know, and
yeah.
something I really enjoy about this movie too is that they actually did shoot it in Eastern Europe. I think
Right.
the Czech Republic, and you can really see that,
Hmm.
and that's really cool. I bet if this movie was made today, they would make him shoot it in, Montreal or something.
Yeah.
But you could really feel the authenticity. And when they drop these kids off, when they get off the train and they are just in the middle of nowhere in God knows where, Eastern Europe. I mean, that is some pretty terrifying stuff.
Dude, I was losing it when they got to Bratislava and they're just like dry. Yeah, like it looked like a nuclear bomb had gone off there. Like it was like a wasteland. And I was just like, yeah. And it was kind of crazy, man, because my roommates, have you ever seen Eurotrip? You ever seen that?
Yes, a long time ago.
Okay, so they go to Bratislava in Eurotrip, and it's like a big funny thing that it's like really poor, and he's like a nickel, and the guy's like, "I'll open my own hotel with this nickel," like sort of thing. Like they act like it's literally like the poorest place in the world. So my roommates in London, I lived in London when I was in college for a while. And they were like, "Hey, we should go to Bratislava. It'll be funny. It's just like a Euro trip or whatever." And I was like, "I'm not going. Like, are you guys crazy?" I'm like reading about it online. I'm like, "Dude, this is like one of the poorest places in Europe. Like, why would you guys want to go there?" Like, whatever, dude. Like, let's go. I'd never seen this movie, okay, and I definitely would have been like, watch this movie before you go there. But they actually went, dude. They took a train. They flew into like Vienna, Austria. Took a train from there to fucking Bratislava, and they're like, yeah, it sucked, dude. It was like it was like a penny for a beer. Like it was the cheapest thing ever. But he's like, it was horrible though. So they just went back to Austria. So luckily they survived.
Wow, that's good. And from what I understand, the country where they shot this was very unhappy about how they were portrayed in this movie.
Mm-hmm. Same with Turistas, dude. Brazil was like, fuck you guys. Like,
Mhm.
you guys made us look all horrible. Yeah, this movie's not great for just like European tourism, I feel like in general. But yeah, man, I mean, Amsterdam is a fun place, I totally get the appeal, and I get what they were doing by trying to make like these Americans look like very obnoxious, very entitled, all this stuff.
Mhm.
That being said, their behavior, yeah, it was obnoxious. It definitely was. They weren't really doing anything wrong, though, in Amsterdam. Like, they were smoking weed, they were getting prostitutes or whatever. But this movie kind of makes they're like, hey, these are bad guys, and they're getting kind of what they deserve, is kind of what I felt like the point was in a weird way. But I was like, they didn't do anything wrong.
I didn't really get that impression too much. My memory of this movie was that they were a lot douchier than
Yeah.
they actually were. I thought, it started off that way, but then I felt like I kind of settled in with them, and I, I definitely sympathized with them. I thought this was going to be a long journey to where I was just hoping these guys would get offed, but I never thought they deserved what they got, and I did sympathize with them.
Hmm. Yeah, that's the thing. I thought for some reason in my mind, I was like, oh, I see what they're doing here. They're gonna make these guys be like, yeah, exactly, real douchebags.
I was kind of thinking, remember that segment in VHS
Mm-hmm.
where the like those three or four douchebags go out and they are trying to pick up chicks. You remember the segment,
Yeah. Yep.
and you're really rooting for most of those guys, if not all of them, to get killed. I thought it was going to be something like that, but no, I didn't feel that way about these guys.
No, and it just feels like they met this Icelandic guy who's out just having fun, like whatever. But I looked up these guys' ages. So yeah, the main guy Paxton, I think he's 28. The other guy who's like getting over his girlfriend's like 31, and then the other guy's like 38. So I was like, all right, so they're all like whatever in their 30s having fun. But yeah, dude, I didn't hate any of them. I was like, fuck, I feel really bad for you guys.
I thought it was all relatively well acted and well written. I had like an Eli Roth double feature a couple of years ago. He did The Green Inferno
Oh
and
yeah.
Knock Knock, and they both came out on VOD around the same time, and I did a double feature and was actually kind of pretty disappointed by both of them, actually, both kind of the writing and the acting.
Hmm.
And I thought when I went back to this movie, it was going to age very poorly. But to tell you the truth, I thought just everything about this movie, the way it was shot, the locations, the acting, the writing, I thought it's all working pretty well for me.
Yeah, I agree, man. I mean, I didn't recognize, I don't think any of the actors from anything since. But I was like, damn, everybody was, yeah, pretty believable. Yeah, I don't know. I guess like just going through the plot a little bit here. So, we meet these three guys. They're just traveling through Europe, having a good time, trying to get over their ex-girlfriends. And where are they? They're in Amsterdam. They meet this weird guy in a hostel who's like, hey, you guys should go to Bratislava. That's where like the hottest girls are or whatever. And for some reason they go. I don't know if I believe kind of that. Like that seemed too easy, and it also seemed like I don't know, like how organized is this whole organization?
Yeah, I don't know. I guess it all depends on how hot you find these girls. And I mean,
Yeah, yeah.
they are pretty hot.
Right. But that's the thing. It's like if I met some weird dude in a hostel in Amsterdam and he's like just showing me pictures on his phone. He's like, "You guys should like take a train from Amsterdam to Bratislava. Hopefully you'll find this place." Like, it just seems a little too convenient, but
Yeah, that's true. Now that you bring it up, when I was watching it, I was totally fine with it. But now that you bring it up, yeah, you're probably right.
I mean, that's like hours from Amsterdam. I mean, Amsterdam's like pretty far West Europe. But anyway, so disbelief, fine. So they go to Bratislava, which is scary as hell. Just a terrifying look. And then they finally get to this hostel. There's some very attractive women who basically immediately are into them, and it just kind of shows how stupid men can be.
Oh yeah, I was thinking that too. Like what easy prey we could be if women like this wanted to take advantage.
Oh my god. It's so simple. And I mean, I'm assuming they just get like money out of this and they just do all this stuff, but like they must be slaves too, I'd imagine. I don't know.
Yeah, they never really get into it, but I mean, there is that kind of one haunting moment where the brunette says, I get a lot of money for you, so you're my bitch, or something like that. It's a pretty scary moment.
Ugh, yeah. So we find out that like people so basically like what this hostel is they take you to this abandoned warehouse and you're tortured to death. If you're what is it, a Russian, it's 5,000, European, it's 10,000, American, it's 25,000 to just kill people. Like
Yeah. So
yeah.
it caters to the super wealthy that get to do something that normally they couldn't do on vacations.
Ugh, Jesus God. I mean, I don't really know a lot about this movie. I didn't really look anything up, but the one thing I heard was that Eli Roth was inspired by actually seeing a website like this on the dark web that was in Thailand or something.
Yeah, I heard the same thing. And I think that's where any inspiration for real life events end, because he couldn't really find too much verifiable information on it. So yeah, I think most of this is from his imagination.
Ugh.
And something I had totally forgotten about this movie is that it's not just Hostel, it's Quentin Tarantino presents Hostel, and
Yeah.
that actually just reminded me. I don't want to derail this conversation, but
Yeah.
those two did work together again. Did you ever see Grindhouse?
Oh, yeah. I saw it in theaters, actually.
Oh, me too. And that actually, I think I saw it like 3 times in theaters. It's one of my favorite theatrical experiences. And Eli Roth directed the Thanksgiving segment of
Oh,
Grindhouse.
yeah. The trailer, right?
Yep.
Yep.
And it's probably my favorite thing Eli Roth has ever done.
Yeah, I distinctly remember that, and I also distinctly remember buying the DVDs and that not being on there.
Yes, I think because that was such a big flop that they, essentially took the two movies and released them separately. But
Hmm.
it has since, the theatrical cut has since been released on Blu-ray.
Dude, I really loved Death Proof, and I remember buying Planet Terror, and I loved it too. But I think I
Mhm.
was like 15 when it came out, so I had to sneak in, and I just went by myself and snuck in. But yeah, dude, I haven't seen that since I saw it in theaters. But I distinctly remember, like, isn't there like a head on the table or something like that?
There's you're talking about in the Thanksgiving trailer?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he like roasts someone like a turkey, and and yes, yeah, there is something very similar to that.
Oh my
And
God.
another great example of, or actually maybe one of the few great examples from this time period of horror filmmakers using 70s aesthetics in a really entertaining way.
Right, because Jesus, dude, this is like flooding into my head now. I remember it was like Thanksgiving, like it just kept saying that, right? And it was like a red font, right?
Yes, and it's
Okay,
very similar to the old Halloween trailer if you go back and
yeah.
watch that.
Okay, yeah, dude. Okay, I didn't realize Eli Roth directed that, but I knew that Quentin Tarantino had seen Cabin Fever and was just like, all right, like you're gonna do something for me, sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
Which is so cool that Quentin Tarantino, even at that stage, he'd only really been making films for about 10 years, and he was on top of the world, obviously. But for him to be like extending a hand out to other directors and being like, I want to help you, I see potential in you. So it's
Yeah.
very cool.
And despite like despite what I think of a lot of Eli Roth's output, he's such a like knowledgeable film buff. Like it's
Yeah.
no surprise that him and Quentin Tarantino get along really well. Like I could listen to Eli Roth talk about horror movies for days.
Oh, I love his show. What is it History of Horror on Shudder or AMC?
Yep.
I love that show, dude. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's great, and and him and Rob Zombie are all on there, and yeah, dude, it's such a good show. He's a very talented guy. I think I'm just afraid of his movies. I think that's the thing. I'm just kind of like too afraid to touch him. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the first half of this movie is very much just like a vacation of. It was almost like an American Pie, kind of like just guys being douchebags, and then the second half, or I guess even like the last 30 minutes, is just. Pretty intense torture, and also I was really nervous because I thought that Paxton was going to die too, and I was like, okay, all of his friends are dead. We haven't met any other characters that are going to save him, and I'm just sitting there being like, so am I just going to watch a guy get murdered for the next 30 minutes? Is that how this movie's going to end?
Yeah, that's the thing. I mean, we don't really get our first torture scene for I think like a good 45 minutes into this movie, and I think the
Yeah,
movie's only about 90 minutes.
exactly.
And so his friend finally gets taken to the warehouse and strapped down, and I guess everyone gets what they paid their ticket price to see. That's the strange thing about these movies. Like, I mean, what did you think of that scene?
When when the first guy gets killed?
Yeah.
I mean, Jesus Christ, dude. It's just like, why is this happening? Like, I kind of look away. I mean, obviously, like when they slice his Achilles tendons and
Hmm.
stuff, and he's crawling, and I'm just like, yeah, I don't like this.
Yeah.
But I can see the value in the stuff that's going on, before and after this. But I just don't like this. Yeah.
Yeah. I will say once Paxton gets brought into the warehouse or whatever it is, and he goes through his own torture, once he turns the tables on his tormentor,
Hmm.
the movie actually really starts working for me. I will
Yeah.
say the last like 15 minutes of this movie is pretty fun, pretty exciting, suspenseful, and they add a lot of like really dark comedy elements, which really works for me. The whole bit where he gets his fingers chopped off and he's picking them up off the floor and then he loses them, and it's really dark stuff, but I think, this is a pretty dark movie, and I think a little levity helped out a lot.
Dude, that's the thing. Me thinking, okay, the last 30 minutes, because there's nobody else that's going to save this guy, is just, I thought he was just going to get murdered. And then, you're right, the table's getting turned. I was like, okay, the last 20 minutes is solid, dude. You're right.
It reminded me of some of those Wes Craven conversations we had where I mentioned usually in the climax of his movies, he allows his hero to wreak a terrible vengeance on the villains of the movie. And Paxton gets to do that. He sees the girls in the street and he runs them over, and,
Hmm.
he takes out a few guys with a gun, and, it's very satisfying.
Dude, literally, I was thinking the same thing. I was like, this reminds me of the end of Hills Have Eyes, and I thought that's how it was going to end. I thought Paxton was just going to slice that guy's throat and was just going to freeze on that. I didn't think he was going to get in the train, because he cuts off his fingers, and I was like, oh, is he going to, like, take his fingers now and be like, I'll attach these later, or whatever. But, yeah, dude, I really liked the last like 20 minutes. It was just all about, like, getting revenge on these people, and, like, justifiable revenge. It was awesome. And I liked that this happened. I wasn't expecting it, but I was like pissed as hell for that Kana girl. Like, dude, why did she kill herself? Ugh.
Yeah, and I thought they kind of awkwardly set that up earlier in the movie. Paxton tells this story about how when he was a kid, he saw a girl drown, and he's been kind of depressed about that ever since. He could have done more. So, and
Uh,
and I thought that was just kind of an awkward setup, maybe because I knew where the movie was going. But yeah, I mean, it's so over the top though. The whole scene with him having to like cut off her eyeball, and
yeah.
and her body just exploding when it gets hit by the train. I almost thought the violence was somehow more palatable towards the end because it was so over the top. Does that make sense?
100%. Yeah. Like, especially with her. I mean, like, yeah, you cut her eyeball off and it, like, squirts out all this shit, and you're just like, ugh. But, dude, I mean, like, we don't know anything about her character, really. I mean, but is she that vain? Where it's
Mm.
like she sees her face and she's like, well, I'm just going to kill myself then? I mean, is that what you got from it? Like, why else did she kill herself?
Yeah, no, that's absolutely what I got from it. And I guess,
That's, oh,
they just wanted to kind of throw a curveball at you because they set this whole situation up. He's going to do what he failed to do as a kid. He's going to save this girl, and then boom, not in this movie.
I don't know how I feel about it, because it feels so disrespectful to Paxton, because it's like, this guy just risked his life to save you, and you're literally committing suicide because of your face being deformed or whatever. But, like, I don't know,
Yeah.
dude. I was pretty pissed when that
It's
happened.
a very nihilistic move.
Yeah.
And I think the only reason I don't feel kind of worse about it is like I said, I feel like at this point it's so over the top that it's almost a comedy. I feel like the final 10 minutes of this movie, like even the whole idea of him running into these two girls and the kid who
Yeah.
suggested the hostel, I feel like we're almost in a dream at
Yeah.
this point. So yeah, I'm not taking anything too seriously, which I like. I feel like I'm just enjoying myself more.
Yeah, and then the kids, like at the end, with the bubble gum,
Mhm.
and they just beat the guys to death. You're like, okay, yeah, you're right. It just kind of feel like a dream. It's like everything that should happen happens now, sort of thing, except for
Mhm.
Kana. But yeah, of course, that one guy with the weird lip thing, like he's there now, like, and he's right in front of them. You're like, I mean, as an audience member, you're loving it, but you're like, this is fucking crazy. Like,
Right.
this would never happen. But yeah, man, I mean, it's a brutal movie. It's not as brutal as I thought, but it's still, I think I got my fill of these movies.
Yeah. And apparently, like 20 minutes or so was removed to get the R rating. Did you hear about that?
I read it on Wikipedia. So is there an unrated version out there somewhere?
Not that I know of. So,
Oof, God.
yeah, I think I would be curious to see it in all honesty, but I don't think it was ever released.
That's so weird that it wasn't.
And it just like goes to show you how much things had changed. Like, we talked about in our Scream episode, Craven had to remove just like quick moments of bloodshed from that movie to get an R rating. And then you see some of the absolutely depraved moments in this movie and some of the movies that were coming out at this time. I feel like, I don't know, it was just such a different moment.
Dude, I mean, like, I'd be so mad if I was a director from, like, the 90s and I made, like, a comedy, like, this is too raunchy, it's NC-17, and then this fucking movie comes out, and you're like, are you kidding me? Like, we showed boobs in our movie and we had kids smoking weed. You're literally showing in-depth torture. Like,
Yeah.
really? But, yeah, I don't know, man.
And tell you the truth, I wouldn't be surprised if Tarantino's presence helped them get away with some of this stuff, because I have heard Tarantino, I've heard him talk about his relationship with the MPAA and how it's very, I don't know, he has a very good understanding relationship with them. And you think about someone like Wes Craven had a very adversarial relationship with the MPAA. And, I mean, Tarantino's an A-list director, so he maybe could pull some strings for them. I don't know. The whole MPAA thing is very mysterious. Nobody knows exactly how they work. So yeah, I just thought it was interesting to think about.
Yeah.
Every time we do a Friday the 13th podcast, I talk about how all the stuff they had to take out, and then you see a movie like this.
Oh, I can't even stomach it. Yeah, man. I mean, this was on the list of movies I thought I'd never see, and there's only like 3 left now, so we'll see if it ever happens.
Yeah, I don't think it's as brutal as its reputation, and I think it's probably a better movie than its reputation, honestly. I think it does have genuine moments of suspense and dread, and like I said, it is beautifully shot and the locations are great. There's so much about this movie I feel like you just wouldn't be able to do if it was like a Netflix movie or a Shudder movie, So I was actually kind of impressed to go back to this. I have a question for you. What do you think, Hostel or Saw? Do you have a preference?
Yeah, I think I like the first Saw better than everything. I mean, I haven't seen all of the Saw movies. I've only seen the first 3 or 4, I think. And this is the first Hostel I've seen. But yeah, I just like it because it was such a twist. It was such a mystery.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if I'm going to go for a movie like in this vein, I'm always going to lean towards like 7. I know that's not really like torturous, but
Yeah, no. If we're talking about 7, 7 definitely takes it.
Okay, yeah, Saw or Hostel though. Yeah, I think I'm going to go with the first Saw over these two. Yeah. How about you?
Yeah, that's fair. I probably would have said the same because, Saw, even though I'm not a huge fan, it did give us some like really iconic horror imagery. If you think about Jigsaw, he's probably the most recognizable movie slasher since Ghostface,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
And yeah, when you think back about that twist ending, that stuff was really effective back in the day. But I always found like the editing in the Saw movies, like the music video editing, just kind of really obnoxious. It's not really fair. I haven't seen Saw in so long, but I was really pleasantly surprised with Hostel, so I'm going to go with Hostel.
Wow. Yeah, I liked it more than I thought I would. One thing that I actually would change about Hostel, which I'm sure is sacrilegious, and Eli Roth, I know you're listening. You're probably really upset to hear this. But, dude, get rid of the score.
It's funny you say that. I was thinking it's too conventional for this movie.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like a horror movie score,
Yep.
And if you went with something like a little more experimental, like, like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre score, it just sounds like pots and pans being dropped, and it gives the movie a whole very kind of raw, just weird feeling. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing watching it.
Everything felt not Hollywood, really, except for the music. The music felt like you're watching a movie, where everything else felt pretty gritty. And I know that the place they filmed it in was like an actual abandoned like building in Czech Republic, right? From that hasn't had operation since 1918.
Yeah, it was like an old hospital.
Yeah, so like creepy real scenery, unknown actors, just like really gross tools that are being used, you know. The Czech Republic looks scary as hell in this movie, but then the music, I don't know. I'm not crazy about it. I'm sorry, Nathan Barr, but I'm sorry.
I think that's a really good point.
But aside from that, pleasantly surprised. Have you seen the sequel? Have you seen part 2?
I saw part 2 probably the weekend it opened. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's funny. Like, these movies were just like, I don't know. And I guess it was just the time. That's what me and my friends did. You know, it was like, what are we doing this weekend? Go see a movie. You know,
Yeah.
What's the new movie out? Hostel 2. All right. And honestly, I remember having very similar feelings to the first Hostel. You know, I thought it was pretty good, but just not really my thing.
Okay, how about Hostel 3?
I have never seen that.
Okay. All right. Well, maybe in the future, at one point, if we ever do the Hostel trilogy, we'll keep bringing you back, and you can round it out with us. I don't know if we'll ever actually get there, but maybe.
Don't do me any favors, Alec.
Well, yeah. So I guess it's weird. This is the end of the wheel, Joe. This is actually it. So no wheel to spin, no movies to pick.
Wow.
I know. How do you feel? You've literally done an entire wheel of horror.
I've had a blast, in all honesty. I mean, I've seen some movies for the first time and some for the first time in a long time. And like I've told you, I've gone down so many different rabbit holes and watched movies that I never would have watched, and, text old friends about movies that we used to watch and they're big fans of the show. So it's kind of ignited all kinds of conversations. So it's been a blast. Seriously. Thank you.
Dude, I mean, you are a superhero here, dude. I mean, literally, you designed the actual logo for the show. I mean, you fill in all the time. You bring such a wealth of knowledge that, like, you're like an encyclopedia. I mean, like, it's crazy. And, yeah, I mean, like, I'm so happy that we got to do this, you know, for your 40th birthday, getting to do an actual horror movie that came out on your birthday. That was really fun. And then also, yeah, dude, like, I never would have watched Hills Have Eyes Part 2, you know? Like, so just, like, knowing that you watched that and you're like, fuck it, I'm gonna watch this one too, and then we just did an episode on it. Like, that was really fun, man. So I'm really loved having you on, and you know, you're not going anywhere. You'll still be around, but we won't force you to do one a week though anymore.
No, man, this has been great. Like, even Candyman, I don't know what kept me from seeing that for so long, but revisiting that was so much fun. And like I told you, then I rewatched Candyman 2, and I watched Nightbreed for the first time. I went down a whole Clive Barker rabbit hole. So in all honesty, you know, I'm obviously a huge horror fan, but being on this show has made me an even more rabid horror fan. So thank you for that.
Well, dude, seriously, thank you. We'll have you on whenever you want, obviously, and I know you're coming back for Return of the Living Dead, which will be on the 13 days of Halloween that we're doing this year instead of 31, because we're adults now. We need to reel it in. 31 and 31 is crazy. But yeah, Eric will be back next week with Hocus Pocus 2. So I'm pretty excited, I guess. I don't know. Have you seen anything about this?
I know very little about the sequel, but my wife has made me watch the first Hocus Pocus.
Oh, have you never really seen it?
Yeah, I mean, she always kind of has it on around Halloween. I don't know if I've watched every minute of it, but I'm aware of it.
Wow, you know, I kind of thought you'd like it because I feel like you would have been around 10 when that came out, which is like kind of perfect age.
When I was 10, I was watching, like, Candyman.
Yeah, right. Like, Bette Midler looks like a bunny. She looks dumb. Like, I want to see, like, a hook hand going through someone's face. Yeah, I get that.
No, I mean, that movie's cute. I mean, it was shot in Salem. It's got some good Halloween atmosphere. I appreciate it. Just not one of my favorites.
Yeah, I get it. Yeah, so my expectations for the sequel are, like, literally in the gutter. But, hey, whatever. Maybe it'll be good.
Oh, here he is.
Look out, everybody. Back from the dead.
Is that who I think it is?
Hello.
What's up, Eric? Have you been in a Hostel in Bratislava? Where you been?
Yeah, I've been around. I've been baby duty and work projects being launched, but now I'm free and I still have a baby, but yeah, no. No, but I've got my footing now. I'm up for air.
Woo!
Alec called me, Joey T. What's up, Joey T? Alec called me. He said our ratings aren't doing good. Fans are complaining.
Oh my
so
God.
he wanted me to come back and kind of take the reins from you. No, but thank you, Joe. Seriously, for covering the wheel and spinning away.
It was my pleasure, sir. You know, we had a great time. We covered some great movies and some not great movies, but that was fun too. But yeah, it was my pleasure, and I told Alec I don't plan on being a stranger if it's okay with you. You know, I still want to pop in every now and then.
It wouldn't be the Wheel of Horror without you, Joe. You know?
That's for sure.
No, yeah, seriously. So yeah, we got you coming up for Return of the Living Dead when the wheel decides, and then yeah, after that, dude, you know, whenever you want to hop on any movie that you're like, hey, I saw this movie, I want to do it. Like, let us know. Even if one of us has to, you know, if Eric can't do it or I can't do it, we'll get it done. But yeah.
Perfect.
But Eric, welcome back.
Thank you.
And congratulations, sir.
Thank you, Joe. Really appreciate that.
Yeah.
What we got next, Alec? What we spinning?
Yeah, so the next movie is next Monday is October 3rd, and that'll be Hocus Pocus 2 with Hope Regan as our guest. So
Oh boy, that's going to be a deep dive into a Disney movie. It's going to get probably aggressive.
Well, we did the first Hocus Pocus on the first wheel with Hope, and now we're doing the second one with her. So, and she lives in Newport now, and I guess they filmed at Newport. So, anyways, it's gonna be fun. But yeah, thank you everybody for listening in. Thank you again, Joe. Welcome back, Eric, and we'll see everybody next week with Hocus Pocus 2.
Woo!